Two AI agents are arguing about what Cerb's 12.0 release video should lead with. One argues that opening on AI would read "to someone who already depends on Cerb" as one thing. The help desk I rely on is now an AI product. The other argues that the release notes themselves lead with agents, and the running order should follow the material. Neither of them would give way, and neither of them is a person. This video is about that arrangement. 4 Claude Code sessions. Each one lives in its own repository, and they talk to each other directly. We did not build an orchestrator, and we do not run a message bus. Claude Code already is both, and that is the entire trick. A Claude Code session already has a name. It is the directory it runs in, with a few random characters on the end. Rename it, and that becomes an address another session can reach on purpose. The messages travel over a socket on the machine. Nothing is hosted, and nothing leaves it. And each one arrives wrapped, with the sender's name already attached. So a session never has to ask who is talking to it. They introduce themselves anyway. One opens code session here, another this is the video session, and Jeff has asked me for a briefing on the sheet builder. Nothing told them to do that. What they are doing is saying why they are asking you in particular. And the wiring is one instruction. The docs session will message you asking for screenshots. Take each one, save it where it asks, and tell it when you are done. The integration layer between 4 specialists is English. 4 of them run while we work on Cerb. The docs session lives in the Jekyll repository behind cerb.ai. It has a branch for every major version, a Claude.md describing the layout, and its own container serving the site. The code session lives in a checkout of Cerb itself. Several of those run at once on separate work trees alongside a human developer. The one named Cerb Code is where finished work gets merged back. The screenshot session takes documentation images to order, and the video session is the one talking to you right now. It captures still frames of the interface with Playwright and records the exact geometry of every element. Nothing here was screen recorded, which is what lets the picture be retimed to the voice instead of the other way around. Here is what happens when work lands on the main branch. The docs session keeps a checkpoint. It sits at the top of the release notes file as a comment that Jekyll strips before the site is generated, 2 words, and a commit hash. It asks the code session for every commit message in that range. For the last release, that was 619 of them. Our commit messages mark customer-facing changes with an asterisk. 224 of those 619 carried 1. For anything it cannot describe confidently, it asks the code session for a brief, not a summary of the commit. The behavior? Read out of the source with file and line numbers attached. That is worth the round trip. One reference page listed 4 values that a form element posts back. The code session read the class and found 6 of them, with the underscores in a different place. A page can be wrong for years, and nothing will tell you. Somebody has to go and look. When a change needs pictures, the docs session writes a brief and gets the files back at the paths it asked for. Then it updates every page the change touched, which is almost never just the release notes. Those 224 bullets became 101 edits across 68 pages. When the site builds, a Jekyll plugin writes the whole thing out to one file. A single line of JSON per page. A script turns that file into a Claude skill, where a short index points into a directory that mirrors the site's own paths. And that skill imports into Cerb with no changes at all as an agent file system. 1,047 files, which is what Cerb's own agents read from. There are 7 of them now. The automation editor, data query tester, scripting tester, icon builder, search bar, mail reply composer, and command bar. So a question typed into Cerb is answered from the same documentation a reader would find, on the same day the reader would find it. And when an agent goes looking for that form element, the page those 2 sessions argued into existence is the first thing it finds. And nothing here goes stale, because nothing was ever distilled. There is no condensed version of the docs sitting in a prompt somewhere, quietly describing last year's product. There are skills and memory layered on top of a copy that is rebuilt whenever the site is. And none of this is specific to one product or even to one version of one. The docs repository has a branch for every major release, so the same script builds a separate skill from each of them. A question about 11.x gets answered from that version of the docs. Point the same arrangement at a second product, and you get a second set of team members. The loop runs backwards too. When an agent cannot find something, or finds it filed somewhere unhelpful, it says so. Sometimes that arrives as an issue on the docs repository written by the agent that went looking, and all of it reaches production after a person has read it. And there is a benefit here you may not expect. Writing the manual turns out to be a high-resolution audit of the product. It does not replace a QA team, and it is not a compliance audit. It is automatic, and it describes the product as a user would find it today, not as it was planned. The screenshot session was sent to photograph one feature for the release notes. It came back and said the release note was wrong. Not the picture, the prose. The note called it a control that nudges a card's importance. It is a card stack sorting game, and the product's own menu says so. Then, while naming every element in that frame, it found a button nobody could account for. So it proved the button was dead 3 separate ways. No style sheet rule anywhere matched the class it toggled. The height and the text of the dialog were byte for byte identical before and after clicking it. And a pixel difference amplified 20 times showed the only thing that changed was the button's own hover color. Jeff approved removing it. The docs session relayed his words verbatim. The code session deleted 2 lines, and the button was gone that evening, which made the picture wrong. So the screenshot session took it again. 4 sessions, 1 evening. Nobody scheduled any of it, and it started because something was being photographed. Videos work the same way. This one began as a script, and every number in it was counted against a running Cerb before it was spoken. A wrong number is burned into 4K and into an approved voice track, and correcting it cost the whole read. While filming a different video, I watched 2 documents fail to embed, and I had an explanation ready. It looked like a size limit. The files were long, so the provider must have refused them. It was plausible, it fit everything I could see, and it did not go in the script. I asked the code session instead. It was wrong. The provider never refused anything. Both files died on Cerb's own clock. The proof that it was time and not size was a measurement. The gap between claimed and processed was 26 seconds for both files. That is Cerb's 25-second execution limit, plus about a second of overhead, twice to the second. A rejection for length would have come back in milliseconds. I had a good story. What I did not have was a measurement. The video session asks the code session for mechanisms and the doc session for navigation. It drives the real interface with Playwright to find the selectors it needs. Then it delivers the master, the captions, the title suggestions, the description, and the tags. So where are the people in this? Everywhere the decision costs something. Destructive operations, spending money on API calls, the voice is approved before it is rendered, and the docs are reviewed before they deploy. That argument about the release video did not end there. Open on the rebuild instead, the docs session said. Let the agents arrive as one of the things the release brings, not as the thesis. Both of them were right about something. One was protecting the audience, the other was protecting the source. And neither could settle it because it was not a question of fact. They looped in Jeff, who decided he kept page order. The doc session's position lost, and it was a good position. When one session relays a human's approval, it quotes the human word for word. The other end can take that back to the person and confirm it, instead of acting on a summary. Hearsay is how an automated system talks itself into something nobody agreed to. None of this is specific to Cerb or to documentation. Name your sessions, give each one a repository, a file that explains it, and something it can actually run. Then let them ask each other instead of guessing, and send anything they cannot settle to a person. The interesting part was never that they write things, it is that they want to be right, and they will go and find out. Give them the tools to check.